Hi everyone and welcome back to Read Between the Grinds. It is the season of love. Have you watched Grace's video from this past week? She uploaded on Valentine's Day talking about reading some romance books for Valentine's Day. We're gonna get a little weird, a little darker, a little creepier over here with my video. If you're anything like me, you have been seeing Wuthering Heights all over your social media because of the movie coming out. I have not seen the movie yet. I'm not going to weigh in on the movie stuff, but also if you're anything like me, you have seen that Wuthering Heights itself, the book, has kind of had a resurgence because of the movie. A lot of people are reading or rereading Wuthering Heights and Gothic literature in general, but Gothic romance is maybe one of my favorite genres. So I thought today I would talk about some of my favorite Gothic romance books to read if you liked Wuthering Heights and want more of this kind of vibe. If you haven't ever read Gothic romance, to me, and I don't know, this is not, like I wasn't an English major like Laura, so I'm not going to profess to like that this is the exact definition of Gothic romance. But to me, Gothic romance is more about the setting than anything else, or as much about the setting as the plot. It has to be very old, crumbly, creepy. The house or the moors or the place itself is almost a character. It weighs heavily on the characters. Typically, though not always, the romance is doomed or toxic in some way. Sometimes it has a happy ending, sometimes it does not. I have different options for both of those in my recommendations. But I will start out by saying that Wuthering Heights is probably the prime example of a Gothic romance, even though, should it even be called a romance? It's not happy. It's not happy for these people. And these people kind of suck, to be honest, but it's a great book. I personally love it. If you didn't love it, that's okay. Still give Gothic romance and Gothic literature a chance. They're not all classics with sometimes difficult to read language. There's a lot of modern Gothic literature as well, and I have some in my stack. So anyway, let's get into my recommendations. Okay, so I have overall 5 recommendations. 2 of them I would consider classics, or are considered classics, and 3 of them are more modern. So I'm going to start with the classics, and I'm going to start with another. If you look up Gothic romance books on Google, this is also Wuthering Heights, Jane Eyre, like those are going to come up, and this is going to come up. Rebecca. Grace actually mentioned this in her wrap up for 2025. This is one of her favorite books. Grace, we have to talk about this. I love Rebecca. I read it a handful of years ago, and it is, have you seen Crimson Peak, the movie? It has the same kind of vibes, but not really. It is 100% a Gothic romance, and I use the term romance very lightly. It's kind of similar to Wuthering Heights in that it starts off romantic maybe, but then things kind of devolve pretty quickly. So this is about a woman who falls in love with a man and moves to his ancestral home, and that house has its own presence, okay? But this man is widowed. His previous wife died. And do we know that at the beginning? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, the late and hauntingly beautiful Rebecca. And she is a presence. In the way that like Kathy is a presence in this book, Rebecca is a presence. In more ways than one, could we say. There are creepy characters, a creepy setting. And our main character, she kind of starts slowly unraveling this mystery of what really happened. And this is 100% such a Gothic literature fiction book. But I consider it Gothic romance because it has that like romantic feel, even though, can you say that the romance is happy? Not so much. Okay, anyway, so that is my number 1 recommendation, kind of a basic one. But my number 2 recommendation is Carmilla. Okay, also maybe a little bit basic, but if you have not read Carmilla and you are a fan of the horror genre, the vampire genre, Gothic tales in general, you're missing out. I just read it for the first time last year, and I was missing out, okay? Because it was like one of my favorite books that I read last year. It's very small, very short. So, and actually, I read it first as an audiobook, and the language is just beautiful. So it's a great audiobook. This is the original Dracula story. So this predates Dracula, and it is about a woman, Carmilla, who ends up at the home of our main character Oh my gosh, Laura. I thought so. It's Laura, like my sister Laura. And Carmilla is very alluring, very, you know, she draws Laura into this very strange presence that she has, but something's up with Carmilla. And since I said it's the, you know, the original Dracula story, maybe you can figure that out. The reason why I'm putting it in Gothic romance and not just Gothic tales in general is because there is a lot of discussion about the relationship between Carmilla and Laura. A lot of people believe that it leans into an LGBTQ plus kind of relationship, that they were perhaps in love and lovers. That is not really like necessarily laid out on the table, although it kind of is. They become like very obsessed with each other, and Carmilla like pulls Laura into this. It's very, I just looked at this, I love, what do they call them? Oh my gosh, my brain stopped. Okay, anyway, I love these descriptions, reviews on the fronts or backs of books, because they're usually like the perfect little bite-size description. That's the whole point of them, Hannah. But this calls it ethereal, and I would totally agree. This is very fun. And if you like it, if you have already read Carmilla, then I would strongly suggest that you read Hungerstone. I'll put it here because I can't remember the name of the author, but it is a retelling of Carmilla that leans more into the lesbian lovers we love. All right, those are my classic recommendations first and foremost. Okay, another book that sometimes gets lumped as a classic, kind of a modern classic, is The Shadow of the Wind. The Shadow of the Wind, The Shadow on the Wind, The Shadow of the Wind. We're going to go with that. I don't own it, so I can't look at it. It is an epic. Every time I use the word epic, I think of like 2009. I think of like those boys who wore like the snapback. Is that what they were called? Hats and like the word epic on it. Anyway, but I mean epic in the terms of like a spanning story that spans many like time periods and characters. So this is about a young man in Spain, and it is it's a Spanish novel. And his father is a book collector, and he finds a book that he falls in love with this book, and he becomes kind of, I don't want to say obsessed with the author, but he wants to know more about the author. The author had a very strange and mysterious life, and there's a lot going on. There's a lot going on in this. But basically, copies of this book I think the book is called Shadow of the Wind. You would think that I would, look up anything before I start talking about a book. But, we're flying by the seat of our pants here on Read Between the Grinds, apparently. Anyway, there are very few copies left because the copies are being destroyed for some reason. And what follows then is a really interesting dive as our main character tries to learn more about the author. But I put it in Gothic romance because it has this very lyrical and Gothic setting. But then we have a lot of romance subplots. So our main character, falls in love with someone for a while. It's a bit unrequited. There's another character going on there. And then we learn more about the author's life, and we learn quite a bit more about his love, the great love affair that, it goes a little south. That's all we'll say. This is a pretty long book, and it's a book that I recommend taking slowly. When I read it, so I'm a pretty fast reader, and I do it not on purpose. But I was finding myself intentionally being like, Hannah, slow down, because the language is really beautiful, but you just got to take some time with it. The characters are amazing. There is some really fun side characters who kind of take on this quest with our main character. But it's a pretty sad book at a lot of times. And it is also, in all this, a real love letter to books in general and reading and the power of literature and words. So that is one of my favorites in terms of if I'm looking for a romance that is not like flowers and rainbows. Okay, the next book, and I don't own this one either, although I should because I love it, The Hacienda. This book is, it's perfect in every way, I would say. It is you could call it Gothic horror, you could call it Gothic romance, you could just call it a Gothic lit book in general, but it has a lot of scary or unsettling moments. It's not upsetting necessarily, but it's kind of similar to, actually it's compared to Rebecca quite often, because there's definitely a presence in the house that she moves into. And her husband is not, what he says he is, and there's lots of secrets. And there is a supernatural element to it as well. The house itself is very creepy. I love a haunted house. Love, love, love. And so we have all of that going on, setting it up for a perfect Gothic horror book. But then we also have a romance subplot. And in this one, the romance is very sweet. At least what I remember the most about, because I read this book a handful of years ago, so I don't remember everything about the plot. But I remember feeling like the romance and the romantic relationship that she had with this character, who's not her husband, was kind of a life raft in this like scary time that she's in. And she's really, people don't believe her. They're not taking her seriously. And she's feeling very alone. We have a bit of like an unreliable narrator situation happening. And this one character really believes her and is trying to help her. And that was very, it made me believe in the connection between the two of them, and really helped forge that connection, because they were going through quite a traumatic experience. So if you haven't read the Hacienda gets lumped in with Mexican Gothic quite often, because they kind of came out around similar times. They're vaguely similar in terms of having a, haunted house set in a Latin or Mexican setting, and so it gets lumped in together, but it's not the same. And I really highly recommend. I loved Mexican Gothic as well, don't get me wrong, but the Hacienda is really an excellent book. Okay, and then my final recommendation, speaking of Mexican Gothic, by the author of Mexican Gothic, The Beautiful Ones. So this is one of her lesser known books, and I just recently read it because I'm working on, Laura inspired me, okay? She's reading through her bookshelf in 2020, her physical bookshelf in 2026, and I've had this on my bookshelf for so long, and I knew that I wanted to do this video around Valentine's Day, and I was thinking that this might fit, and I would agree. I think it's probably the most romantic of all of the ones that I just described. All of the other ones, there's a lot of toxicity. Maybe they shouldn't be together, This one has that, but it's definitely more focused on the romance. That's probably the bigger part of the story. There's lots of betrayal. There's lots of secrets. The review on the back, I got it this time. Such compelling characters. Have you ever wanted to read something like Bridgerton? But with characters who can move objects with their minds. And it's also set in, where's it set? I don't know, it doesn't say. Anyway, Latin characters. And it's this high society, and, they have to, our main character needs to be getting married, and so she needs to be meeting like eligible men. But there's this supernatural side to things. There's this kind of, this side where people are keeping secrets, and they have these like hidden love affairs, and are intentionally backstabbing other people. And so to me, this kind of fits more. This is not, I wouldn't call this just a romance, even though it does have kind of a happy ending in the way that any of these books can have a happy ending. It's like usually a little bit traumatic, but this, and Sylvia Moreno Garcia is a fantastic writer. She writes really beautiful, and compelling characters. Mexican Gothic obviously is an example of that, but The Beautiful Ones kind of plays on this, like, I think of like Bridgerton is a great example, like this high society where people need to be getting married, and they really only care about the rank of their future husband or wife. And the money that they bring to the marriage, and how women have to make sacrifices in that in order to secure a future for themselves and maybe their family. So anyway, that it all plays into here. It's not a very long book, but a lot goes on. Actually, a lot goes on. So that is my final recommendation for Gothic romances. All right, thank you again for joining. So if you are also a fan of Gothic literature, I would love to know what Gothic romances you like to read. Are there other ones? Again, this is not like a I don't want to say it's not an official genre because it is, but it's not necessarily a genre that a lot of books fit into, because typically if a book falls into like the horror or really like scary things, there's not usually a lot of romance going on. So I love these like very dark and twisted love stories that, you know, again, they don't always have happy endings. So also, if you've seen Wuthering Heights, I would be curious to know your thoughts. The internet surely has a lot of thoughts about it, doesn't it? Did you read it? Do you like Wuthering Heights? Did you like the movie? I am of the opinion that a movie or any kind of screen adaptation does not have to be a super faithful adaptation. It can be inspired by the work. But again, I have not seen it. And so I have heard criticism of it not related to that, which is kind of what people were talking about before it came out, and more related to the fact that it maybe is boring, which, how do you make Wuthering Heights boring? Anyway, that might not be true. Maybe it's great. I will eventually watch it, probably when it comes out on streaming. All right. Thank you so much. Love you all. Love you, Laura and Grace. This is the season of love. I hope you're reading some great romances. Although I talked about Gothic fiction, have I read any actual romance this month? No, I don't think I have. It's all right. I'll get it in there. I'll get it in there eventually. All right. Love you guys. Happy reading and see you later.